Hello, my name is Jonathan Forster, and welcome to the Multi-Story Thinking podcast on interior design. I'm an interior designer and educator. My job is to improve quality of life and productivity by helping people to create beautiful and practical spaces to live and work in. The Multi-Story Thinking podcast takes an educational slant to the interior design world. If, like me, you are curious about how things are done within the industry, want to know how people got their breaks and how they've developed their careers, and get some top tips and advice, then this is the podcast for you. So sit back, relax, as we help unravel the mysteries of interior design. James Journet is the Sales and Design Director at Parkside Architectural Tiles, which is part of the market-leading Parkside Strata Group. He's based in their Clerkenwell Studio and works with the Central London architectural and interior design community to produce sustainable and technical specifications for all construction sectors. The company has been pioneering a holistic approach to sustainability, is set to become carbon neutral in 2022, and is partnering with the World Land Trust to protect precious natural habitats. In this episode, we discover the balancing act of aesthetics, technical requirements and budget, the importance of building relationships during the design and specification stage of projects, why we need to overcome the myths surrounding perceptions of sustainability and cost, and we contemplate the damage to flooring that can be inflicted by a 3-year-old.
The actual company itself is about 30 years old from its sort of inception, and it was originally based as a Midlands tile distribution company, working on a lot of hospitality projects, so hotels, bars, restaurants. That was the main forte of the family. It was a family-run business as well, and about 5 years ago, it was bought out by a larger group, a national sort of tile distribution company, and a sort of one of the sort of major global players as well, part of a much larger group. And there was an emphasis to sort of basically establish itself more in the commercial market than the retail market as well. So, and expand from the hospitality side of things. So there was several sort of new showrooms were sort of established, one in Clerkenwell, which I'm in now, and I'll tell you about in a second, and the Cotswolds and Chelsea, and in Leicester as well. We've got new places happening in Glasgow. So the company itself is effectively a distribution company for, and we do manufacture some, distribution predominantly and the manufacture of porcelain, ceramics and concrete tiles, and with some acquisitions of other tile companies such as Strata Tiles, who have been in the industry for 20 odd years and a major sort of player on big infrastructure and transport projects throughout sort of the UK, sort of TfL, Heathrow Airport, Gatwick, and internationally as well. Myself, I came over in 2020. Mid 2020. It would have been a little bit earlier, but the pandemic obviously just put a slight skid on that for a few months. And my background was international projects predominantly and large UK projects. I worked for a competitor for the last 10 years of that. So I was very fortunate to work with all the major sort of A&D practices, sort of the Fossers and Partners, Gensler's, Grimshaw's, AHMM, BDP, etc. on very, very large scale projects, and predominantly in the Middle East and the US was my main focus for about 10 years of that. I was increasingly sort of coming up against sustainable options and then being asked sustainable criteria. So it's been a painful interest and sort of a learning. I always had a bit of interest in environment and environmental sort of issues and technologies around that. I was finding innovations in science very interesting personally, but I had a bit of a work driver where I was constantly working on large projects, and they would have things like LEED accreditation when it was sort of coming into the fore a bit more, which is American accreditation, and it was being pushed towards these huge Middle Eastern projects. And I would constantly have the same headache on every single project where I was trying to get my documentation, and I was trying to push the manufacturing partners that I worked with at the time to sort of help me out with information, and everything was a bit obscure because it wasn't really a necessity. It wasn't really breaking the project, but it was something that would have really helped and facilitate. And I had a long time of that, and I got pretty frustrated with with how that worked. So I was aware of the MD who was part of the Tops and Parkside sort of current sort of buyout and guys for a few years, and we had a chat, and he sort of said, "What things are you interested in? What would you like to do? What are the holes?" And I said, "Well, actually, my main sort of passion is actually pushing sustainable design. It's where ultimately the clients are going at the moment, whether they're sort of developers or investment companies for the larger projects." And I was very much adamant that if you don't get ahead of the game here, you're going to be really far behind. And fortunately, that was music to his ears at the time, because they'd already done 2 years worth of sort of R&D and work with sort of University of East Anglia with environmental studies to really scrutinise the porcelain ceramic supply chain and the infrastructure of how products are made and supplied to construction projects, and quite harshly as well. Some really big sort of criticisms and recommendations and pressure points were addressed really interestingly. So that was music to my ears, and that was all I needed to know. And on the back of that, I've sort of come into the Clerkenwell Studio as my sort of residence for 90% of the time, and we redeveloped the space as a sustainability and design studio. So, and that's on the back of really the requirements of the local sort of architectural practices who are very close by. We're behind BDP, HMM around the corner, Grimshaw's are over the road, and et cetera, et cetera. These very large sort of architectural and design practices.
They're driving the sustainability agenda through their product selection.
They are, and actually, it's and even just every aspect of their social responsibility and the way they work is sort of increasingly focused on sustainability, and the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals as well. I think it's a huge emphasis on ethics as well as morality and practicality, and that drives everything. And that was something I was very interested in anyway. As I was a bit of an equal opportunities champion for people in my teams who I work with. I was very conscious to make sure we're getting a fair crack at gender and people from different places, and I think, and that was very nicely reflected in the culture that I came into, and very, very pleasantly surprised by actually how in depth it was. And our current MD, who took over 6 months ago, he actually chairs the Group Sustainability Council for the biggest distribution company in the whole of Europe. He was very much invoking sort of these SDG sort of pressure points and targets and how we react to that. So that was, I come over to champion the sustainable design and sustainable specification arm of the team and the company as well. So whether that's involved in getting through our agendas or helping with our pledges and policies, and then actually down to the more practical elements such as sort of making sure we've got sustainable packaging on our samples that we send out, or the delivery costs or carbon neutral options. And unfortunately, we met a little bit after our sustainability event that we hosted in October, which was fantastic. We hosted it at the Barbican, and we had an evening of talks with sort of a lot of our favourite and very close partners from around sort of the interior design and architectural community.
Yeah, it's a shame I missed that, but I was quite sort of pleased because we popped in late one afternoon before Christmas, didn't we? And the idea of a tile company being sustainable, and I instantly thought, God, how do you do that? Because it feels to me, and I might be sort of generalizing here, but that it's an industry that is taking raw materials, creating a product which often then isn't recycled or is hard to recycle, is thrown away. I was thinking about hotel. I was in a hotel. They were about to refurbish, and I was looking around all the sort of surfaces, the hard tiled surfaces, thinking, what are they going to do with all this stuff? It's 20, 30-year-old materials. So is it an industry that has traditionally been hard to be sustainable? And how are you making moves to be more sustainable? I suppose that's the key to it.
Yeah, I think the obvious thing is to not skirt around as well. We do CPDs and presentations, and I'm never afraid of this. Is actually, as people in construction and building per se, we are the biggest contributor to carbon emissions, and there's horrifying statistics. The general one is about 40% of carbon emissions in the UK come from construction itself. Well, actually, when we dig into this, we have partnerships with people like the World Land Trust and RAP and some other industry, and then people outside the industry who are charity partners, etc. And they think that figure is actually closer to 60%. And I think whatever way you get around it, the construction industry is a huge pollutant and detrimental to environmental process. However, saying that, we don't have another way of there aren't many better ways at the moment of constructing or efficient ways or cost effective. And actually, I think that's as much an important thing to balance out is actually the practicality of the solution. It's fine saying I've got something that works, but if it costs 10 times as much as the previous solution, it just won't be used. So how we've gone about it, I as I mentioned before, my previous experience was working on projects where I was worked with architectural practices and clients where they're looking for materials and solutions to finishes, whether it's facades, cladding, interior, tiling, etc. Made from materials with recycled content, low energy efficiency, low energy emissions in their manufacturing process. And also the fact that they could still fit in terms of the budget of the technicality. They had to be slip resistant if they need to be. They have to be frost resistant. They might have to be large formats. And of course, the same thing everyone wants is budget driven as well and economically viable. And there's no point in the Middle East, you will not get a project on site if you're 10 times more than someone else down the road. And it doesn't matter how strict the environmental policy was. And even their technical requirements still get outstretched by, they'll swap budget for slip resistance every day of the week in Qatar or Saudi Arabia as well. And I can say that with perfect experience of being on the wrong end of the conversations as well. So you need to be practical to the sense where it's got to be viable. And my ethos was, when I came over, was to ensure that we've got an offering that makes it easy. So the studio itself, was a perfect example of that, where we will have people in and they come and look around, and then you popped in yourself, had a quick look. You want them to be able to see a cross section of every look and aesthetic that they would want in a project. So if it needs to look like marble or limestone, or if it's a bold colour, or if it's a three-dimensional effect tile, or if it's a finishing concrete or something like that, we want to make sure that you can pick something as you want to design. So, but it's going to have no compromise in technicality, no compromise in aesthetic, and no compromise in budget. So, but in good heart and good faith, you can actually build a project around the economics and the drivers of the project. And that's I always think, in my head, it always works like a triangle. I always think of the balancing act of aesthetics, technical requirement, and budget. And actually, sustainability should it's a Venn diagram. The sustainability circle should be all around that anyway, and not you. So I'm a big believer in if you have to make a compromise, you will make a compromise. So we try and take the compromises away, and it's quite hard work, to be honest. We scrutinise our supply chain a huge amount, and we put a huge amount of pressure on our partners who we work with to produce materials with high recycled content. It costs money as well as time to investigate sort of the recycled content, the raw materials, where they're coming from, the energy that's used. So I think I mentioned before, one of our factory partners who work mainly for our sort of quite volume-driven projects. So 10,000 metre plus sort of residential developments, 20,000 metres. It might be a shopping centre that's 10,000 metres. We push them quite hard to develop their technology, and they respond to that by investing a huge amount of money, so 100 million euros over 8 years. And they now have one of their new production plants produces 3 million square metres a year, and they have 50,000 metres of solar panels on the roof of the factory that generate 100% of their own energy needs, and a surplus they sell back to the grid. They also have a water consumption rate of 0.01%. and an average recycled content of 26%, that can go to 80% for certain ranges and certain looks and feels. So that produces a material that costs on the ground, and I don't want to get into numbers. This shouldn't be the way it's driven, but practical terms means it can go into a project and the material costs less than £20 a square metre, and it's still slip resistant, and it's still technically a porcelain, and it still will be very durable for a shopping centre or an airport floor. And that for me is the progress. And there's always been people associate a premium with recycled or environmentally friendly goods. That doesn't work for every project. So you can't be paying more for it, and it'll A, put people off, and B, it'll stop things working. So for us, the practical sense and the facilitation of that process is about having options that are readily available and easy to find. So we do that via our website, of course, and digital sort of marketing tools and online marketing. And practically, we do it with actual physical options as well. And we're going to, with our current client base and people that work with us regularly, by the end of this year, our policy will then be enforced that we won't be launching any new ranges with less than 20% recycled content.
Okay.
And then it'll be the quite aggressive phasing out of products with less than that.
Yeah.
And that puts pressure on the industry. So we're trying to drag up everyone else in the industry as well, even including our competitors.
Yeah.
To do the
So
same.
it's about that, examining the whole supply chain and all the features of that makes those little incremental steps possible.
Yeah, and it's a desire as well. There is a desire from the end users. Like if we work on our smallest projects, which are residential interior design projects, which are individual homes, and we go all the way up to an airport shopping centre, or people, if we roll out for brands such as Next or I don't know Harrods, or people we work with on a regular basis, or car showroom companies, and they're using huge amounts of materials. We want to make sure they've got the same opportunity to use something which suits with their morals as a company. And everyone, there's lots of greenwashing. It's frustrating for me, and it's also satisfying, the fact that the greenwashing means that they're hiding, they're not doing as much as we are. But equally, you want everyone to be doing a little bit more, and as long as we keep pushing that envelope with products and making people aware of it, I think that's our job. We work in quite a small niche of the whole of a project, really, where we're just out finishing materials. They look pretty, they get a lot of attention, but actually there's loads that can be done behind that. So we work with people like Bow, Ardex, Caracol, etc., and then we help push them to say, right, we want to finish in a wet trade behind the tile. What's the adhesive going to be? What's the next part? What's the backing board going to be made out of? How can we sort of get involved in that? Because whether we don't get involved in that area of the project itself per se, but actually we want to promote a full, complete sustainable specification. And we do things such as we offer a carbon offset delivery service now, which is the premium, but it means we'll contribute via the World Land Trust to carbon emissions. And again, we're increasing our electric vehicle fleet as well for deliveries, and the capacity they can run at as well is ever increasing. So I think you have to be quite brave to actually push it in the market at the moment. Economically, we're coming through a pandemic, and I'll say through because I'm quite optimistic. It's the worst part is behind us, but difficult economic times, but you still have to put your foot in the future a little bit and can't retract. 10, 15 years, was it 12 years ago, 14 years ago, the last recession, I was actually doing CPDs on sustainable products, the very first ones that came onto the market, and with some recycled content, and working with Briam on the CPD, and it was quite successful. And then the market crashed, and everyone forgot about the environment completely went out the window again. Everything went back to budget-driven materials, D&B projects. It was completely out the door, and I was heartbroken a little bit. But you have to move with the times and wait for it. And I think the pandemic did us a huge amount of good because it gave everyone social responsibility as opposed to greenwashing. And now you're worried about people's emotional well-being, their health, and it all encompasses with slip resistance. It encompasses with recycled content, where the material comes, carbon footprint, recycled packaging. And I think we're over that hump now of it being a fad or being quite superficial. I think there's a real sea change in people's mentality and desire, I think, and it helped drive us as well. I've had some brilliant conversations with designers and architectural practices about things that we can do better, and then you think it gets you thinking a little bit and pushes another button. So
I think it's such a long process, isn't it, of encouraging people to be more sustainable. But I think there's definitely a change in the wider public's perception of the importance of it, around COP26, and, people in the design industry being more familiar with the UN sustainability goals. And, there's a sort of upsurge of information and more of a desire to get involved. And I guess the thing for businesses is about producing a product that is cost effective. When it comes to budget, it's always going to be an issue, isn't it? But I think people are valuing the more sustainable products, and which is great. But have you experienced resistance to these moves from any parts of the sector? Or?
Funny enough, it's actually there's a little, I wouldn't say. There's a slight lack of work. There's some people that are very stuck in their ways in terms of materials. I think the architects that have been in the industry the longest are actually the easiest and most progressive. And I think there might be a self-confidence issue for the youngest architects and designers, strangely, to make a leap, because you want to be innovative, but at the same time, I think there's a breaking point where some people feel like it's a bit unknown. The nervousness might creep into a client, and I think there's also trepidation with more inexperienced designers to push their clients into and actually lead their clients with good choices, as opposed to be led by the client completely. And I think it takes experience more. I think the more experience and more confidence you have to actually lead the design and the client to say, actually, this is a great choice and this is why. And it depends on the project, of course, and the actual end user. But I'm being quite general. But there is, I've noticed some people they still have in their head an association with premium cost to sustainable materials, which you could say that for any material in any fashion as well. But yeah, it's that's a bit of a myth, and it's a bit of a myth that's being dissolved quite quickly as well, where the economics of I mentioned the factory of ours that has 50,000 square meters, invested 100 million euros in their production. They're a huge company. They produce 3 million square meters a year from that factory site alone, but probably about 15 million square meters a year from the rest of their factory sites on the same sort of location, which aren't using the same technology. If they use all their own electricity, that's a power source they don't have to buy. And actually, they're made with electric kilns as opposed to gas-powered kilns. And as I'm sure everyone noticed over Christmas, your energy prices at home are going through the roof because of the prices of gas, and that's not going to come down anytime soon either. So it's that gas power, that economic driver can inform sustainability in another way. And for me, I'm not really fussy if someone's made a decision because of morals and economics. I know my intention is to improve the amount of sustainable projects we work on, and whether they've done that because it saves them some money. But actually, if you use less raw material that you've extracted from the earth because you've used pre-production waste into the same production scale, or whether you've used electric powered kilns, which are solar powered from your own factory roof, as opposed to gas powered, you've saved yourself money, which actually means the production cost of the raw materials now, I say raw materials when they're completed and finished, of a porcelain tile, for instance, or ceramic, can be far less. And that will improve as well. And actually, I'm quite comfortable that these economic factors will improve the efficiency as the technology becomes more proficient as well, and more prolific across the industry. There's not a huge amount of factories that have this technology in place. So it tends to be the ones that have a bit more money, but everyone will catch up on it, and the industry will equalise at some point.
It's that economy of scale, isn't it, that where it makes
Absolutely.
sense. How far down that line do you think you are? How much more? How long do you think it's going to take to be to a point where you can start to relax with your? Do you think, or is it going to just carry on forever?
I think
the quest for sustainability.
I always think you can. I think we've got quite a way to go. Actually, there's been some huge leap forwards in the last sort of few years, and a lot of this has been on the technical side of production of materials. I think the next step is if people are specifying and they want to be sustainable, and I won't just, there are other tile suppliers available, I should say that, of course, but if we've done some fantastic work on the back of that, but behind the actual material itself, it's quite easy to greenwash and say X amount of recycled content, and you have no idea whether that's verified or not, and very few people have verified it, and I know that for a fact because I work for the competition. I know that for a fact because I look at other people's claims and scrutinise them quite heavily. But I think looking into the production processes and the transport and actually the installation, things like the adhesive, the adhesive that we mentioned, we regenerate, and it's got 50% recycled glass in. That's an industry leader by a factor of probably 10 in terms of recycled content, and that'll be a global product. And we're very fortunate that we can offer that for some projects, and that'll be on the market for everyone, which is great. But I love things like that. I think that's a great energy driver. I think things like I think people should be more questioning and ask harsher questions of the projects and materials they're picking as well. If your client has got that claim, then you might as well go 100%. I don't like doing things half-assed. I think you should go full-blooded or not at all. I think that's the sort of key. So I think people ask questions. The other real evil that we're looking at, apart from waste on the construction site, is actually the end of life as well. And this is the real challenge. And I won't profess to have an easy answer for this, but where's the circular part of the circular economy going to come into it? Now, we have part of our CPD has a lovely graphic which has got the linear economy, the sort of recycling economy, it's a bit squiggly, and then the complete circular economy. The complete circular economy is something we're yet to get to for a lot of products. We've got a few. The biodegradable ones are one. The sequel range we have, which is made from, can be reconstituted and completely sort of broken down and remade into the same product again. But porcelain tiles, inherently, we can reuse these if we get them in a good condition and can take and remove and extract some of the sort of adhesive off the back, or enough of the adhesive off the back to make them viable for reconstitution in terms of a new production. But it's I think that's the real jump. And when we have a perfect answer to that, I would say we've got a long way to go on that field. So the production way of it, the production use of the first step, I think we're doing quite well. And I think that's really progressed nicely over the last 10 years, and we're in a really good spot. The middle part with the usage and how we fix materials, how we use them in projects, how long they can be used for, I think all these things add up to a really attractive offering, and that seems to be ever improving. And then the last bit is actually the end of life and actually making them completely reusable. We've got another system, actually, I should mention, that's been used where we've had material laid for a car showroom floor in a completely, without adhesive, actually. It's quite an innovative product. And then the same floor was taken up and used again in a coffee shop. Exactly the same tile. So there's something to be said of that as well. Can we reuse the materials in another product? Can a project in demolition phase sell the materials somewhere else? And the word reclaimed isn't used enough. And I think it's got really strong connotations with environmentally friendly products, such as timber. Reclaimed timber has great. You can use it again and again. The energy to use it as well is an important thing. But I think we can extend that into other materials, whether it's concrete or brickwork or tiles. There was a great project in Liverpool, and the name escapes me a few years ago, and they took the roof tiles of homes, of council homes, like a terrace homes, and they made it into a terrazzo, and then they reused it into the new build project that they use. And things like that I think are fantastic. I love all the innovation, so I do follow sort of social media for these trends and try and find something quite interesting, and we'll be happy to shout about it here in Clerkenwell and the rest of our studios.
It's about being creative, isn't it? And just examining the process and taking a bit of time to find an alternative. Yeah,
and I think having just stepping back a little bit sometimes as well. And it's really difficult. You get busy, and everyone you use the same things. I think that's you've got to shout quite loud to get someone's attention for a product if you want them to use something new, but because they'll always go back to what they're comfortable with. So trying to turn people is a bit like quite a big bus to try and turn around, and we're trying to constantly sort of put that in. But for me, I turn that theory on its head by saying, actually, well, what's a way you can use the materials you've always been comfortable with and use, but actually we can make those more sustainable. So you don't have to feel like you're taking a risk or changing your dynamic or your approach at all. So I think facilitation, I know from my instance, I'm lazy inherently. If something's easy to use, I'll use it more. And if that comes down to my recycling at home, if I put my recycling bin next to my standard bin, then I'm more likely to recycle. So I have two bins next to each other. We've just got to facilitate that. And the same for things like documentation as well. I think we have all our documentation in a row. If you want EPDs or certificates of recycled content, etc., that's in place. And I think that was a big pain I had previously, where I'd start every project from scratch rather than have it as an open book of sustainable products.
Yeah. What differentiates your products? Obviously, sustainability is quite an issue, but in terms of design, I always struggle with trying to work out where to get products from and why I should be going to which supplier or not, and it's often down to contacts. But you showed me quite a few really sort of nice innovations in design, and you've got so many different versions on the website. It's quite sort of bewildering. But what from a design point of view, what sets you apart in terms of your competition then?
I think we've got what actually is that we've got a real broad breadth of offering actually, and that's partly historically why I mentioned earlier. Is actually we've got Parkside, which are very design led, and we've got ranges where you can customize your options completely. You can design the surface texture of a tile that can be used in a very high traffic area. You can pick bespoke colours for rail colours, and we've always been very design led. That hospitality aspect and that design for hospitality work, which we've worked on in the previous, that's part of our DNA. So we need to have interest in materials, and whether that's ceramics of different geometric shapes, three-dimensional shapes, bespoke colouring, water jet colour designs, etc., that has to run through what we do. That's what the people that known Parkside for a long time expect, and we need to always maintain that. And on the flip side of that, we also, to maintain that, first of all, we have to look for innovative products as well. We're always on the lookout for innovations, and we're very fortunate that the industry partners who manufacture renown us for that and actually come to us with offerings, or we have discussions about what can be produced next. And the biodegradable three-dimensional tiles, that's a great example. We've got complete exclusivity on that for the UK, and actually will probably be the hub for the whole of Europe. And then we'll reach us into our global partnerships as well. And that's a material that's completely organic, and it's from a partner that traditionally made ceramics, but we're involved with a sustainable architect who designed this fantastic material made from clay and agricultural waste. And then on the other side of that, we have a technical requirement as well. So our partners from our other side of our business, who are Strata, and they're used to working on projects such as airports, shopping centres, leisure centres, swimming pools, facades, working with concretes and more fluid products and more customizable products that are a bit more technical. I think we cover the bases really well, and I think that's quite a unique offering. Is actually we've got very, very strong technical expertise, and yet I think quite inspirational sort of design-led materials as well. And it's quite nice actually. The thing I think anyone who works in the industry from the supply side of things tends to have a eye for aesthetics as well. And I worked in natural stone previously, and many years ago I worked in furniture. About 20 years ago, this gives away my age a little bit. But once you're interested in the finishes and whether they're hard or soft in a project, I think that's all you can look at. And I think I'm always on the lookout for something new, and I love engaging with designers as well. So we're actually currently, I'll spill the beans now, but we'll be working on competitions to let architects and openly invite them to design some ranges for us as well, coming up with a few different materials. And some of those will be sort of sustainable options, which we're really excited about. And I think that's a lovely way to engage with the trends. And trends is a bit of a dirty word for architecture and design, but we do try and look into what's coming from either the fabric side of things or the softer finishes, which tends to migrate into the harder finishes, or just generally what are the requirements being asked for by clients as well. There's been a lot more of a well-being feel to design in recent sort of times as well, and people try and make public spaces a lot softer. And I've noticed this for 10 years, whether it's a shopping centre or an airport lounge or a hotel room, and that's lovely as well. So I love watching these sort of long-term trends sort of follow as well. And
yeah, how do you support architects and interior designers in that process of developing their ideas and then also moving from that into specification?
To be honest, it all starts off with relationships as well. And whether it's someone who's just found us for the first time, or you've known them for a long time, you can have a fair idea of what their aesthetical tastes are or what their client base is looking for. It starts off with the aesthetical brief, or I've always worked on technicality. That's always should be the next question you ask is the material suitable? But for me, if I've been doing some work on some office projects recently, and a good example is there's tea breaks areas and things like that, and I'll sit down with the designer or the architect or virtually as it has been on a telephone call, and just to get the first ideas. And actually, it's about honing that in. I think that process for me is always it's a very enjoyable one. But actually, it's a process. You never. I think it's always worrying when someone likes the first thing you sort of put in front of them, because I don't think you should mould into each other a little bit of that. And that these working relationships take a while. But if it's for a new project or someone I've just met, then that process is also very lovely, because actually you're figuring out someone new. And I like knowing about the brief. I think the context of a design, we work on predominantly internal spaces with a lot of our materials. So I like to know about the client. So I will always ask questions about what the client's desire is, about what their input is, what they like out of it, because ultimately that's what an architect or designer is having to ask themselves. And then actually how reflective of the context of the external of the building as well. Is it a period building that needs enhancing? Do you need to juxtapose the inside to the outside? Or do you want to completely be in harmony with the inside to outside? These are all nice processes, and ultimately we progress through technical specifications and then sampling, producing mock-up areas, and then actually getting the material to site as well. And then there's nothing better than seeing a project that's finished. And it's always the thing that everyone's criminal of, is actually you move on quickly, and any one of us has got something else you're a bit busy with, but actually going back and seeing a project, and if you can sort of physically go and have a look, is always very satisfying. And it's lovely to see some of the ones that have been around a lot longer than others, and I think it's great as well. But it's interesting to see people's takes on materials as well. If you're an architect, you might see a concrete effect tile in a completely different way to someone else. And likewise, if you're more classical and you like natural stone or marble effects, it's very interesting for me, that process.
You've got products for every kind of occasion, really, looking at the website. And what's the benefit of using the ceramic tile over something that, I'm just thinking about, other products that mimic the tile, like a sort of, vinyl flooring, I suppose. Over and above the durability of it. How do you compete against those kind of products?
Well, I think that there's a huge sustainable aspect to this as well. And actually, the marble effect tiles and stone effect tiles it's replacing the having to use quite a finite resource, which is not natural stone. And it's hugely energy inefficient to extract natural stone. And actually, the materials itself, there's a practical, the durability is the obvious one. But if you go into modern construction, buildings are getting lighter and lighter weight. And if you can use a material that is 6 millimeter thick and weighs circa 15 kilos a square meter, and you can lay a meter by meter of it at a time, whatever the aesthetic is around that for the floors or the walls, shower areas, slip resistant, vertical cladding, external cladding, as opposed to a natural stone, which will be 4 times the weight, 6 times the weight, probably, if you go up to the thicknesses you really need at larger formats. There's huge energy efficiencies that move through the structure of the building. It's very important for me that actually it's not just a finishing material. It's a whole building and construction industry itself, I think, is looking for ways to save materials and energy in its use. So that's a huge one. The transport energy costs, are big factors as well. If you can transport 100 square meters of material across 2 pallets, and the weight is probably a ton, where the equivalent will be probably a container or 20 pallets in another material, and the weight will be sort of 100 times more. It is ridiculously exponentially worse for all sort of aspects and parameters, I think, to look at that. So that's the other one. And I think also the technicality of the consistency as well. You can have a consistent finish, same quality, and we look at vinyl has technical issues in terms of porosity and things like that, and it has its place. We do supply vinyl to an extent as well. We have it on, but I depends on the use that's needed as well, or the budget perhaps. But if you know that you can have a consistent finish from the first square meter to, as I use the big scale ones, to the 10,000 square meter, there's no good having an expanse in a shopping centre and you've got 4 different batches of material that break into each other, and it's just, you can't consider the actual finishing itself or performance. And I think the aesthetic of that is really desirable. Again, hospitality projects, if you've got hotel rooms, you want every hotel room to look exactly the same. If you've got a consistent sort of banding of that, if it's a residential development, etc., and big expanses as well. So technically, I think we'll move to slimmer and slimmer materials, and I think the installers and construction companies that work with us are hugely au fait with these materials now and work with them very easily. So I don't think that's an issue. But I feel like that's probably the main benefit is consistency of finish, and the durability is the big one as well.
Whereabouts would you like to see more tiles used then, if you're trying to encourage designers to use the products in more experimental ways, perhaps?
I think we've got the big one for me is it's already used a lot in the Middle East. Is porcelain gets used in the slab formats, which are 3 meters by 1 meter. That's the largest we can go to. Bit bigger than that, but that's about the industry largest that can be made comfortably and on a regular production. And they get used on facades quite a lot in the Middle East and the US, especially, with very intricate facade systems and rain screen systems. And it's always, for me, it strikes me as the very, I wouldn't say bland, but I would say the safest design choice is always used. And I haven't seen a building yet that's actually really pushed the envelope in the designs. You can have an external side of a building that looks like it's clad in statuario marble. You could have like a Saint Noir sort of black style marble. You could have highly sort of bold designs. You have bold colours, and I see it a little bit more in sort of other materials that are used, like GRC and things like that, and other cladding materials. But I do think porcelain has got great thermal efficiency. I think the external sides of buildings could be sort of really zhuzhed up, so we say. So if I was going to see something really pushing, I'd love to see that. And I think the general fabrication of tiles as well. I think people forget that in the UK, we don't have a culture of fabricating the same hard finishes throughout a property, and it starts in your home. So in the continent, in Italy, Spain, and in France, etc., it's quite common to have a tile throughout your whole house. Carpet is much less prominent. You might possibly have timber in some elements and a few rugs, but it's just for the heat efficiency and the way the buildings are constructed. And I think more and more properties in the UK in the last 10 years have started to come into that more. I don't ever think we have a completely hard finished, complete home on a regular basis, but I do think people are using the softer finishes and these more and more because you can put underfloor heating in there. It can be quite comfortable. If you've got kids, it's very easy to look after the mess they make, or pets, etc.
The practicalities of clearing.
The practicalities, and I've got a 3-year-old, and I can't tell you the damage she's done to my wooden floor in my house, and you sort of, I've used real marble before. I think you can still use these tiles to fabricate. On the continent in Europe and in the US as well, they use tiles for worktops quite often with the lovely edge details and the beading details, and that for me is a look that's underused here. I think it's fantastic. You can have bold colours, you can have sort of quite neutral colours, you can make it quite traditional, it can look quite contemporary. I think you can have a full slab which is completely seamless with mitered joints, or you can have quite prominent joints and make it look quite bold. So I think we haven't exploited it because it's just historically not what people do, but it's lovely. This is when, again, hospitality, offices, developments and developers that really push it a little bit really start pushing that use of materials inside. But yeah, I think fabrication is one. I think it's lovely as well. Swimming pools is another one. We do a lot of swimming pool work, and there's nothing nicer for me than I worked in a residential pool a couple of months ago, quite a nice big residential pool, not my own unfortunately, where they used the same finish throughout from the whole. It was a basement level floor, but they had a gymnasium, a living area almost, a gym area, and then the swimming pool. And actually the pool tank was all exactly the same finish. So it almost, from the appearance, looked like it was carved from a single piece of stone. And all the edging detail was all made from the same tile, with the mitered edge and the steps, all the niches and detailing elements all made from the same material. And I thought it looked fantastic. It's a really smart sort of contemporary look as well. And it comes across as that sort of single space. So
you've got products that can act in a more sort of compositional way, adding colour and texture throughout the space, that rather than just about performance, it's about then design features and really creating spaces that use colour and texture positively to create the mood and atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think having bold colours, and actually there's ranges that we have which you can pick the rail colour. You can customise from absolutely any rail colour, and then have a matching grout and trim, so you can have uniform features. But in my past, I've also worked on hydrotherapy pools as well. So the use of sort of psychedelic colouring for your mood, I think is actually vastly underrated as well. I think it's underused in a lot of projects as well. And I think biophilic as well, colouring or biophilic design as well, incorporating that into your designs, I think is something we could do more of as well. I think it's a lovely way to incorporate sort of earth tones and textures as well. And that well-being theme, we come back to softening up spaces. And I think, again, it depends on your taste as well. Of course, ultimately, someone has to make a choice on what they want. But I personally think that softer sort of tonal variation is a very nice way to be, and then enhancing that with sort of biophilic colours and biophilia itself as well. It's we talk about neutral colours as well. The biodegradable tiles we have, the tones of clay, and the texture is as you'd expect clay. I think I got you to touch one of the tiles, and it feels like clay, and that's that tactile thing. I think does so much for your psychology. Yes, yeah, very important.
That adds another dimension to it, doesn't it? Because you would typically think of tiles of being a polished glazed surface, wouldn't you? But once you introduce,
and cold as well, and then they will absorb also the ambient temperature as well. That's the other thing. I think if there's something called a soft glaze and comfort finish we have with many of our ranges now, and effectively, if you have the tiles and you walk to them barefoot, the soft texture actually gives an impression of temperature. So if you have you don't per se require underfloor heating, but if you had it slightly warm, that will absorb and radiate the inherent temperature of the room, and the ambience will be inherent. So it doesn't have to feel cold, hard, and glazed. And I remember my parents' kitchen when I was a kid, and even now they have like polished tiles in their bathroom. If you walk around the house and the polish, it's not very pleasant, to be honest, and the coldness is reflected in the surface texture as well. So I think there's lots of ways you can make it comfortable, practical, and then it's quite a simple process now. There's lots of options on the market, and I think there's lots of ways you can do that. But yeah, and if you want to be bold, go and pick some of your own round colour and design. And I think that's a nice process. As I mentioned, that's one of our, we call it Design Lab, which is a range where you can pick the rail colours and pick the shape, and you can pick the texture, and then the extension to that now is actually the pattern. So you can actually choose the pattern, choose the texture, choose the colours, and it's a really lovely way to sort of add a little bit of personal touch into something and still keep it quite cosy. I think is a nice way to put it.
That's a nice sort of service. I think that bespoke option. Do you get many people using that? What's the?
To be honest, absolutely, and we're going to have a bit of rebirth of it as well, probably for spring as well. It was during the pandemic. We launched. It got launched about 3 months prior to the start of the pandemic last year, and so unfortunately, we've not been able to show too many people. So part of our sort of CPD program and sort of lunch and learns would be to sort of come in and talk about the design process, and actually combining that with standard products as well. There's not really a premium on these products, which is fantastic. That what makes them quite appealing. Again, is economically they're quite viable, and then we combine them with more sort of off-the-shelf products, and you really then can make quite an affordable but quite personal design, I think, which is lovely. And the reception that's been brilliant as well. We've got, whether it's a commercial client or a private client for a residential project, and they all seem to receive it in the right way. And it's very nice. It's a very pleasant part of the design process as well. So yeah, I'm very fortunate that I get to work on sort of, and my colleagues and always have worked on a big cross section of different project types with different profiles of architects and practices, interior designers. And I find that's always been the nicest part of the job, is actually be able to stick your nose in 100 different projects which are completely different. And
that must keep the variety up, mustn't it? And every project coming in slightly different.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's really nice, and actually, you just get to meet different people, and that's the nice thing. And it's whether they're the clients themselves or all the design teams. It's just a lovely different mentality to step in as well. So yeah, maybe I'm a glutton for punishment. I don't know.
Thank James for taking the time to talk to me. It's really encouraging to see the passion and energy that he's putting into the sustainability agenda, and particularly in the tile sector. It's really nice to see the holistic approach to sustainability is being implemented across the whole of the supply chain. The range of CPDs and events that they are putting on is really helping to raise awareness. There's some links on the show notes, so look out for some upcoming events. If you go and have a look at their website. Sustainability in the specification process is something that we're introducing our students to at the interior design course at the University of Plymouth. If you'd like to know how to become a kick-ass interior designer, follow the links in the notes. I'd like to thank Dave Clark from I Am The How for production support and invaluable advice in the setting up of this podcast. Kay Hansen for her planning support and co-hosting for these and our educational podcasts at the University of Plymouth. And Mark Frith for the music. Really like to hear your feedback. Please leave a comment or get in touch via the website or Instagram. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.